Hey, so I got this really cool old mirror from my friend Christy, and Christy was given this mirror from a friend of hers, and Christy asked me to refinish it. I'm kind of doing a bunch of pieces for her for a new place that she's just moved into, and she really liked the look of the mirror, but not so much the color. So I've just brought it outside because it's really nice out and not too hot, just to take a look at it, and I'm going to clean it. But before I do that, I noticed that on the back there's screws, and I'm pretty sure that I can take these screws out and separate the glass from the frame, so it'll be a lot easier to work on, and I won't have to worry about making a mess on the glass, even though it's pretty easy to get off. But I'm going to start by grabbing my drill and a Phillips bit and get the back off, and then we'll take a look and see. The screws are actually pretty old and kind of rusty on the outside, but they're still in good enough condition to come out pretty easily. So I'm just going to take these all out. I always put the hardware into some sort of container because I don't want to lose anything. And you can soak these in, it's a vinegar mixture, and that'll take the rust off. I actually came inside into the kitchen to grab a few things to mix a little concoction that's supposed to take rust off of the screws. I couldn't really find how much of each to use, so it calls for vinegar, so I've got some white vinegar and some salt and then baking soda. So I'm probably going to use maybe about equal parts and mix it in and see how that does. If I ruin them, which I might, but if I ruin them, they're pretty standard screws, and I'll just buy some new ones. But I'm going to try mixing that up just right in here and letting them soak while I go out and start cleaning. So I will be back. So here's the piece of glass that I took out. It's in really good condition, except the edges are definitely kind of gnarly. One thing I wanted to mention was make sure that you wear gloves when you're handling glass or anything like this that you could get cut from, obviously. So I just use these Craftsman gloves. They've got rubber on the fingertips just to be on the safe side. And then I've just got it set outside for now. Well, you can see the moon and the reflection. Anyway, I'm going to move over, so I'll show you the products that I use for that. Okay, so here is the mirror with the backing off, and obviously the glass has been removed. So it's ready for cleaning. I always start all my projects by cleaning them really well. It's super light and it's really easy to handle. You can see underneath it's plastic. So what I'm going to do is just get it wet with my garden hose, and then I like grease lightning for cleaning because it gets off any kind of grease that might be on there that will prevent the base coat or the paint from sticking well. So I'll start with the frame wet, and then I'll just give it a good spraying down with the grease lightning. I'll let it sit on there for a few minutes, and then I will always wear gloves when working with any kind of chemical, and then I'll use my little scrubby to kind of scrub this down. Normally I would use steel wool, but because it's plastic and I don't think it's going to need that much scouring, I'm just going to use a sponge. So I'm going to get that going now. It's all cleaned and rinsed really well. That's all I'm going to do tonight because it's already getting dark. So I'm going to bring this in and let it dry, and then I will show you how my little science experiment with the screws ended up. So I'll see you in a sec. Alright, so back in the kitchen, my little concoction seems to be working. So I would say about half a teaspoon of just really completely plain table salt, and then half a teaspoon of baking soda, and I just mixed it together in my container. They've been sitting in here, and the rest is definitely coming off. You can see it, the color of the water is starting to change. And I can even see, like, every single one of these was rusty, and you can even see, like, I don't know if you can see that, but on this one you can definitely see some of the silver shining through. So let me see if I can find a better one to show you. Oops. Yeah, you're probably not going to be able to see, but it's definitely helping. So I'm going to keep those soaking in there. It's not going to hurt them to be in there overnight, so I'll soak them overnight, and then we'll see what they look like in the morning. So check it out. It's a couple hours later and the water is definitely got a lot more rust in it. So check it out. The rust is gone. I didn't even have to scrub them. So I was looking at them and they all look really good. So I'll strain them and rinse them off and then leave them out to dry. So I guess the recipe worked. So that recipe was 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, half a teaspoon of regular table salt, and then half a teaspoon of baking soda, and just mix it together and let your rusty nails or whatever kind of hardware I guess would probably work. Let it soak in that for, I guess it was like 2 hours, and we're good. So cool. Hey everybody, it's the next day. The mirror was able to dry overnight and I'm back outside with my Wise Owl primer in gray, and I'm just going to open that with a screwdriver. I really highly recommend using a primer. This is my personal favorite. I like the way it goes on. Primer is much less expensive than a good quality paint, so if you use a primer, you're going to get a lot more for your money that way. Typically, I always do 2 coats of primer, and I'm using a Wise Owl F50 brush. That is F for flat and the number 50 for the size. And I just chose this size because I thought it would fit well with the size of the mirror. So when you go to use your primer, you'll definitely want to give it a really good stir. I recommend stirring it for about a minute, and I usually keep a bunch of craft sticks like this on hand, or I always pick up an extra stir stick when I'm at the local hardware store. So you'll just want to stir really good. A lot of the pigments will settle down onto the bottom. The reason why you want to prime, there's a couple of different reasons. One was the first one that I already told you. The second one is that the primer will serve kind of like a barrier between your piece and the paint that you put on, so that if there is anything odd that didn't get cleaned off when you cleaned it the day before, the primer will serve to kind of seal it and help those pigments or tannins not come through, so that it's not an issue down the road. Because the last thing you want to do, especially if you spend a lot of time and effort painting a piece, and especially if you're going to sell it to somebody, you don't want to worry about things coming through that paint later. So the primer is just always a good idea. I know some people don't prime and they just paint, but I really feel like it's a super important first step, just to make sure it's done right and that it lasts for a real long time. So I'm just putting on my first layer of primer here, and that technique where I'm kind of pushing the brush up and down into the grooved area is called stippling, and I'm doing that just to get the paint down into the little cracks and crevices of the raised little decorative part of the mirror. So I'm going to quickly prime this and let it get all set up and dry it overnight. You want to have it set for at least 4 hours before you put your second coat on. It'll be dry to touch easily within an hour, maybe even quicker, because we're so hot and dry here in the Denver area. But I will let it dry overnight and just make sure that it's nice and set up before I put my second coat on. So stay tuned for step number 2, which is applying the paint.